My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm 68 years old, and I'm a retired librarian. The sharp clatter of Chloe's ceramic coffee mug hitting the granite counter echoed from the kitchen, followed by her voice, tight with frustration. I just wish she was gone already. Honestly, Daniel, it's like living in a museum with a permanent, unpaid nanny attached. I froze, my hand hovering over the delicate porcelain teacup I was carefully placing back into my grandmother's china cabinet. The cabinet, like many of the finer things in this house, was mine. The house itself, technically, was theirs, but only thanks to the substantial down payment I'd made when I sold my own home to move in 3 years ago. Hearing those words, so casually cruel, so devoid of any gratitude, felt like a physical blow. My throat tightened, but I didn't make a sound. I simply closed the cabinet door, the click unnervingly loud in the sudden silence of the living room, and walked away. Chloe wanted me gone. Fine. But she wouldn't just get rid of me, she'd lose everything I brought with me. And that, I knew, would be far more than she could ever imagine. To understand how I ended up in that living room, carefully arranging my inherited china while my daughter-in-law wished for my disappearance, you need to know about Daniel. My son, my only child, has always been agreeable. A kind boy, easily led, and deeply uncomfortable with conflict. When he met Chloe 10 years ago, I saw her charm, her vivacity, and her ambition. I also saw a certain calculating glint in her eye that I chose to ignore, blinded by my desire for Daniel's happiness. They married, and 2 years later, little Leo arrived. That's when things truly shifted. Chloe, a marketing executive, found the demands of motherhood and her career overwhelming. Daniel, a software engineer, worked long hours. They lived in a small, starter home, struggling with mortgage payments and childcare costs. I, having recently retired and feeling a bit adrift in my quiet house, offered to help. I suggested selling my larger home, using the equity to help them buy a more spacious place, and moving into their new, larger home with them. It seemed like a perfect solution. I'd provide the down payment for a beautiful 5-bedroom house in a good school district, contribute substantially to the monthly expenses, and offer free, live-in childcare for Leo. They'd get financial stability, a bigger home, and peace of mind. I'd get to be close to my grandson and feel useful again. The house we bought was a lovely colonial with a spacious attic that Daniel converted into a bright, airy suite for me. I poured my savings, nearly $250,000 from the sale of my house, into their down payment. My furniture, including all my cherished antiques, filled the common areas downstairs, giving the house a sense of warmth and history that Chloe, with her modern tastes, initially tolerated for the sake of the space. My grandmother's antique writing desk, a dark cherry wood piece with intricate carvings, became my anchor in the living room, a place where I paid bills, wrote letters, and organized my thoughts. For the first year, it was wonderful. Leo was a joy, and Chloe was effusive in her gratitude. "You're a lifesaver, Eleanor," she'd often say, her hand squeezing mine. "We couldn't do any of this without you." But gradually, the gratitude began to thin, replaced by an unspoken expectation. My daily routine revolved around Leo, school drop-offs and pickups, cooking healthy meals, supervising homework, and entertaining him while Daniel and Chloe worked late. I also managed the household, doing the bulk of the grocery shopping, cleaning, and laundry. Chloe started to treat my financial contributions, a regular $1,500 transfer each month for household expenses, less like a gift and more like a utility bill she expected me to cover. The first real crack appeared about a year and a half after I moved in. Chloe decided the living room needed a fresher look. She started by moving my antique desk, the one that had belonged to my grandmother, from its place by the bay window to a cramped corner near the coat closet. "It just feels so heavy there, Eleanor," she'd said, not meeting my eyes. "We need more open space." I'd felt a pang, but tried to be understanding. It was their home, after all. But then she started making comments about my collection of vintage books, suggesting they were dust collectors, and cluttering the shelves. She even hinted that my grandmother's china cabinet, a beautiful Victorian piece, was a bit much for a modern dining room. Each comment, each rearrangement, was a subtle erosion of my space, my taste, my very presence. Then came the incident with the guest room. My attic suite was private, but the fifth bedroom downstairs, a small, unused room, held some of my overflow items, a sewing machine, art supplies, and a few boxes of sentimental papers. One afternoon, I found it completely cleared out. Chloe beam. Surprise, Eleanor. I've turned it into a proper guest room. My parents are coming for 2 weeks next month, and they'll be so much more comfortable down here. She'd done it without a word of consultation, as if my belongings were simply clutter to be swept away. My sewing machine was relegated to a dusty corner of the garage, the art supplies crammed into a closet, and my boxes of papers. "Oh, I put those in your attic, of course," she'd said, waving a dismissive hand. It was a clear message: this house was hers, and my things, and by extension, were secondary. What I didn't understand yet was the extent to which she saw me as a resource, not a person. My constant presence, my financial support, my free labor, she considered it her due. The turning point came a few months later, about 2.5 years after I moved in. Leo had a nasty flu, and I'd spent 3 sleepless nights nursing him. I was exhausted, but Chloe had a big presentation at work and Daniel was on a business trip. On the 4th morning, I was making Leo some soothing tea when Chloe came downstairs, impeccably dressed. "Eleanor, could you pick up my dry cleaning today? And maybe run to the grocery store? We're out of almond milk." Her tone was flat, demanding. I felt a surge of resentment. "Chloe, I'm really tired. I think I need to rest today." She sighed dramatically, rolling her eyes. "Honestly, what do you even do all day? It's not like you have a job." "I have a real job, Eleanor." That was when the numbers stopped looking accidental. My monthly $1,500 contribution, combined with my consistent grocery spending and covering utilities when they forgot, meant I was essentially paying for over half of their household expenses. I started keeping a meticulous ledger, something my librarian's mind found comfort in. The figures were stark. They were using my money to fund their vacations, their expensive dinners, and their new car payments, while I lived frugally in my attic suite, providing free labor. The "I wish she was gone" moment, the one that started this story, happened a week later. It wasn't the first time I'd heard her complain about me to Daniel, but it was the most direct, the most cutting. I'd been polishing my grandmother's china, a quiet ritual that always brought me a sense of peace. When I heard her voice, so full of disdain, it was as if a switch flipped inside me. The casual cruelty, the dismissal of my entire being, crystallized everything. She didn't just want more space, she wanted my resources without my inconvenient presence. She wanted the benefits of my labor and my money without the burden of my personhood. She wanted me to vanish, but leave all that I provided. My immediate reaction was a cold, quiet fury. But it wasn't a shouting fury. It was a librarian's fury, methodical, precise. I didn't confront her. I didn't even mention what I'd heard. Instead, I began to plan my vanishing act. I started with my ledger, detailing every penny I'd contributed to their household, every bill I'd paid, every significant item I'd purchased for the house. I also made a list of every personal item I owned that was currently in their home. This wasn't just my clothes and the contents of my attic suite, this was my antique desk, the china cabinet, my mother's silver tea set, the comfortable armchair in the living room, even the high-quality stand mixer in the kitchen that I'd bought, the good set of pots and pans, and the Dyson vacuum cleaner. These were things they used daily, things they had come to consider part of their home. I quietly started looking for an apartment. I found a lovely, small 2-bedroom unit in a senior living community across town, with a quiet library and a garden. It was perfect. I secured it with a deposit, arranging for movers to come in 3 weeks, on a Tuesday when Chloe had an all-day off-site meeting and Daniel was always at the office. I didn't tell a soul. I continued my routine, cooking, cleaning, caring for Leo, smiling politely at Chloe's dismissive comments. Each smile was a silent countdown. The day arrived. I dropped Leo off at school as usual, then returned home. The movers were due at 9 a.m. I walked through the house, a final inventory. My antique desk stood by the coat closet, still out of place. The china cabinet still held my cherished dishes. The stand mixer sat on the kitchen counter, ready for Chloe to use for Leo's birthday cake next month. I went to my attic suite and packed my remaining personal items into boxes. When the movers arrived, I directed them with a calm, practiced efficiency. They carefully disassembled my bed, packed my books, and then, under my precise instructions, began to move everything from the downstairs: the antique desk, the china cabinet, the armchair, the silver tea set, the good pots and pans, the stand mixer, the Dyson. Even the expensive set of guest towels Chloe had complimented so often, which I had bought, went into a box. I left Bay. Only the things that were unequivocally theirs: their sofa, their television, their basic kitchenware, their cheap plastic plates. By 2 p.m., the house was eerily empty of my presence. The living room was a gaping space where my desk and armchair had been. The dining room looked sparse without the china cabinet. The kitchen counter, once bustling with my appliances, now held only a cheap toaster. I left a single, handwritten note on the kitchen island: "Chloe, you wished I was gone." So I vanished. With all. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. I locked the front door, placed the spare key under the mat where Daniel always found it, and drove away in my car, leaving their spacious, now somewhat hollow, house behind. I didn't hear from Chloe or Daniel for 2 days. I imagined the scene: Chloe returning from her meeting, expecting me to have dinner ready, walking into a house stripped of its warmth and most of its functional items. The silence from them was, in its own way, a confirmation of the impact. On the 3rd day, Daniel called, his voice strained and confused. "Mom? What happened? Where are you? And where's everything?" I explained, calmly, precisely, about Chloe's wishes, about my contributions, about the fact that I had simply taken what was mine. He stammered, tried to defend Chloe, tried to make me feel guilty. "Leo misses you, Mom. And we need the mixer for his cake." I told him I missed Leo too, but that I couldn't live where I wasn't wanted. I then informed him that my monthly contributions would cease immediately and that the $250,000 I'd put into their house was a gift, not an investment, but that they would now have to manage their finances without my constant bailout. The aftermath was exactly as I had anticipated. Chloe was furious, leaving me several scathing voicemails accusing me of being vindictive, selfish, and of stealing things that she considered theirs. Daniel, caught in the middle, tried to mediate, but his attempts were weak and ineffective. I simply didn't engage. My new apartment, though smaller, felt like a sanctuary. My grandmother's desk now sat by a sunlit window, its cherry wood gleaming. I arranged my books on my own shelves, and my china cabinet held my dishes, undisturbed. I still see Leo, of course. I arrange visits with him directly, taking him to the park, the library, or for ice cream. He's the only part of my old life I truly miss. Chloe and Daniel are struggling financially, I hear, having to adjust to a budget that no longer includes my substantial contributions. They've had to buy new kitchen appliances and furniture, and Chloe now pays for full-time childcare. My desk, once relegated to a cramped corner, now sits proudly in my own space. It's no longer just a piece of furniture, it's a monument to my independence, a quiet reminder that sometimes, the most powerful way to make your presence felt is by making your absence undeniable, and taking everything that was truly yours along with you.